Candice King is back. Do you know that you are a super fan favorite on this podcast? On a side note, you are the most listened to episode of all time. I have people on the weekly reach out to me going, are you ever going to have Candice on again? Are you going to ever have Candice on again? And I'm like inside secretly being like, do I want to tell them? Do I want to tell them? I'm like so excited. So literally like the number one episodes. This is so special that you are back on the podcast for a part 2, kind of a Superbloom Candice, if you will. I don't even know if that made sense, a Superbloom
It does.
Candice, but
I'm also just, part of me just wants to make like, I'm so glad all those bots I hired to listen to the episode really paid off. Thank goodness.
I thank you for the bots because those bots got me great advertisers. So thank you for your bots, Candice. I really appreciate that. No, but seriously, it's
that's so
such
cool
a treat.
To know.
No, it's such a treat because it's the people that write in and that ask about you and stuff. It's not just like superficial stuff too. Like I've had a lot of people that are like, oh, is this person coming on? I'm like, you want to do that because they're popular or because they're on a hit show or whatever it may be. Your fans, your followers, your friends, the people that go along on your journey, I think that they are super evolved humans, and I know this, and the questions that they write in and that they've asked, regarding our episode, I just was like so blown away. They're just really, really, really kind, evolved humans and or bots. Maybe they're the bots too. But I really I wanted to start off and thank you so much for coming back on. And this is so appropriate because I feel like, you're going through this brand new phase of your life. I'm in this brand new phase of my life, and going back and listening to an old episode that we did, like one of the first back in, it's not even that far back, but 2019 feels so far back.
That feels like a lifetime
ago. When I looked and I was like, I want to know the exact date. So it was like September 4th or something, 2019.
Oh my gosh.
Wow. We were just about to hit COVID, come January, February, March. And I had no idea that the world was going to completely change and how much everything just kind of like blew up out of nowhere. Anyways, that's neither here nor there. That's a different episode. But we have evolved so much in just those 2-3 years. And I know that you have. And I went back, and also on another side note, I went back and I listened to the episode because you gave such great advice on motherhood. And I don't even think you realized it because it was before you had your second baby. You had only had one and you were a stepmom at the time. And I think that I learned so much from you. And now I just want to learn even more from you because now you have a second. Now you have a new baby, your Superbloom podcast that we have to get into. We have to talk about what is your life like now? What's been going on? There's so much. Where do you even want to start? Should we start on what it's like being a new mom on your own, doing this and being a super mom? Because I am so overwhelmed doing this, and I'm currently 5 months postpartum, and I don't know how you continue on and do all the things you do. How do you do it? How can you give yourself a break? I guess is the real question.
Truth is, it's really, day by day, month by month, year by year. I think that there's also, and thank you for all of the kind things that you said, by the way. And I actually, now I want to go back and listen to that episode because I think that we do, the lack of sleep in parenting is real. I think there was a study lately that says you don't go back to feeling like fully yourself and get like a normal person's night's rest until the kids are about 6. And that's if everything's just like smooth sailing.
Right. I was about to say
until your youngest is 6
or something, but then you worry about college.
No.
Yes.
No. Yeah. That's even more stressful. You're like, are you okay? Are you making good choices? I think that, even just having a second child, it was really funny. when my co-parent partner, I don't know how to refer to an ex-spouse these days because it feels weird to say like ex, like as if like some high schooler, like, yeah,
that's what I was about to say. It must feel like childish.
I know, it feels weird.
Yeah.
So like, my co-parenting partner in life, when we decided to have a second child, it really was all within the plan. And initially when I had my first child, her dad was traveling for work and I was working and filming in Atlanta on the Vampire Diaries. And so it was kind of a non-traditional way of bringing a child into this world. I didn't know that you were still on Vampire Diaries during the second baby.
Oh, wow.
Oh, no, first baby. First baby.
No,
okay, first baby. Right. So we were apart. I was working like crazy. He was working like crazy. So the second time around, we were like, you know what would be so nice? Like, we're here. Like, this is a great year to like have a second baby. We'll just try it out. If it doesn't work, like, you know what? We've got so many trips planned for this year in 2020. It's going to be great. And let me tell you, I took a pregnancy test. Like, literally the world shut down, and on when the NBA shut down, and we, had already kind of like tried to have a baby, and we were like, gosh, could you imagine? That would be terrifying. 2 weeks later, I'm staring at a positive pregnancy test, and I was like, no. Oh my, like, this was the curveball. Like, I wanted us to be like together in one city, but sheltered in place at home, fearing a global pandemic was maybe
not knowing what was going to happen.
Extreme and having no idea. Yeah. It was really tough. Like, there's a sisterhood of, I think, the experience of like finding yourself in 2020, with child, and just trying to figure out like, wow, okay, this is a curveball. Even anyone I know who had a child at the beginning of the year and into the pandemic, just that kind of isolation, because you do need support. You need a support system when you're a parent. You just do. It doesn't matter if it is the two most like able, to be their co-parents who are just the best at life and best at parenting. They even need support. So it was just a very bizarre year to, trying to support all of our children and each other. And then also just really going into protective mama mode. It was the first time I had, out of both experiences, that I never experienced any postpartum with my first child. I'm very grateful I didn't experience any postpartum with the birth of my second child, but I definitely had, I forget what it's called, whether it's like prepartum depression.
Well, there's perinatal anxiety disorder. There's like prepartum pregnancy.
Something like that.
There are so many names, and I've been taught them. So you think at this point I would be fucking educated enough to say it, but I'm not educated enough to say it because I've got.
You also have a 5-month-old, so
sure, we'll go with that. That's the excuse as to why I'm not educated enough. It's what the show's about, but I don't know anything. That's okay. But you had it before, but as you should, because you were living in an environment where you're like, what is going on? The world is crumbling outside. I'm creating this baby. It's going to come up. I'm sure at the time, the hospitals, you didn't know, do I have to wear a mask? Are they going to allow my partner in the room? Are they going to allow my other children in the room when this happens? Am I going to be there alone? Like, who's going to be my support system? So I'm sure you had anxiety pre going into it because of the unknown.
Well, also other children in the house with other needs, like that was a big hurdle for me to get over emotionally, was the reality that we had teenagers in the house that also needed like to be outside, needed to see, like they biologically need to be around other people their age, like having a conversation with with like a psychologist and a medical expert of like, this is necessary to their emotional and mental health.
Just the stimulation they need. Yeah.
Yes. And because they were in a, on computers from 8 a.m. to 3 p.m., only coming downstairs once for lunch. We were homeschooling our other child who wasn't around other kids, my preschooler or kindergartner. And because she's also asthmatic. So it was just this constant state of anxiety and worry and trying to control everything that
of course,
was impossible to control.
It was out of control.
And it was just, it was out of control. And I couldn't even find like sanctuary in going for a walk. Like I would start walking and then I'd have a mask on, but I couldn't breathe. And it's so hot. We were living in the valley in LA.
Yep.
And, you know, it's 100 degrees outside and you're just trying to walk, but keep a mask on. And then people are fighting and yelling in front of you because someone was jogging without a mask on. It just felt like a constant heightened state. And I really am so grateful that I had a psychologist I was doing like phoners with every week. I also had a doula who was working with me on the phone, who was just, you know, really showing me different practices to bring down my heart rate, bring down my like stress and anxiety levels. But I hit a point where I was in bed for at least 48 hours, if not 72, and just needing to be like, you have to calm down and eat now. Like you have to stop. I binge watched all of like Selling Sunset. Like I didn't want to speak to anyone. I just needed to I couldn't function anymore.
What trimester were you in? Were you in the first, second, or third?
Second. I was in my second.
Did you find that once you got out of the second trimester, you kind of got out of that funk, if you will?
Yeah, I did. I don't, I think there were a couple things I had to give permission to what our family needed to, which is like there was a kindergarten school that we had our child go to, you know, and that was like a relief in a way, and
a breath of fresh air,
allowing like our older kids to also have, you know, they're safely with tests. I mean, the amount of money I spent on COVID testing on that, that year was wild, but it was the only thing that calmed me down. It was, and I felt very fortunate. You know what I mean? Like we were really lucky. I could afford all of those, you know, I could afford the testing. I could also afford the emotional and mental health support at that time that not everyone could. But those were the things that helped. I also like had arranged a weekend for, you know, friends, a small group of a few people to come and stay at a house for a weekend of my girlfriends. And we all got like insanely tested. And that just was like that little boost of like, okay, we get to like honor this experience and see each other and hug each other. And I just,
it's normalizing life at that time.
Yes. Yes. And it's bizarre to be like at this point now looking back and be like, wow, that was a different world. You know,
it was such a different world.
It happened so slowly and not that long ago. And, you know, at this point, it just feels like this really bizarre nightmare and like this bizarre, like nightmare dream that somehow, you know, we all somewhere walked through, but it was just so funny because I just was so thrilled to have a second child and thinking like, yay, this is the year. It's all part of the plan.
Right.
And like,
did you feel even in your first child that you, during the second trimester, was there anything weird for you where you felt, or you never had any of that? Because I think it's the reason why I keep bringing this up about the second trimester is that's when I actually had the hardest time in my pregnancy. And that's when my highs were higher and the in quote unquote bipolar disorder, if you will, came out in the forefront. And it was interesting to me because every single mom that I talked to would say, oh, are you just giggling all the time? Because the second trimester, that's what happens. You just giggle, like everything's so fun and like everything's easy. And for me, that was by far the hardest time of the pregnancy, where I was like, if this continues on like this, I don't know how I'm going to continue on with this pregnancy for my own mental stability. And as soon as the third trimester hit, it went away. It was just like bizarre almost, like how fast. So I actually have never heard another mom talk that the second trimester, that there was even anything other than just like the happy giggles and life is like fucking great. Obviously you had the pandemic, that you had the anxiety that was already brought on upon you, but I didn't know if that happened in the first pregnancy as well.
No, I had it more, I think, in the initial, like the first trimester is where a lot of my anxiety kind of rested. I'm someone who really doesn't like to talk about the fact that, like, anyone who even tells me that they're pregnant before they've hit 12 weeks makes me so nervous. I just want to go like, la,
so
la, la,
nervous.
la, la. And so that's usually like where my anxiety hits. I think I was more distracted in 2020.
Sure. That makes sense.
With everything that was going on.
Right.
But yeah, no, I had like such a good pregnancy that first time around, which is wild considering how much I was working and on my feet, and I was on a plane every 2 weeks, to travel to see like my, at the time, my husband and
but it was almost maybe like a distraction in the
it
best
was a huge
way.
Distraction. But I definitely like this experience the second time around. It's interesting. Like my pregnancy was so like very easy the first time around, medically speaking, until the birth. And I still had a great birth. Everything just got a little murky.
Sure.
And then my second time where the pregnancy was really stressful and, uncomfortable, and I wasn't outside and moving my body very much. And but the birth was amazing. It was like my dream birth, even though I gave birth in the COVID testing room.
Oh my gosh. So now was your husband at the time allowed to be in the room with you?
Yeah. I mean, well, they didn't really have much of a choice. Like it was very quick, which is very normal for second births. I woke up in the middle of the night and, and just had contractions. And luckily my mom was in town and prepared. And so she was able to be with, our oldest of I call it the big and the littles. She was of the oldest of the littles. She was able to be with my daughter Florence, and yeah, I had some contractions, and then I was like, "Did you let the doula know?" And he's like, "Oh yeah," and then I was like really in pain, and then I was like, did you call back? Like, what's going on? He's like, no, I text her. And I was like, it is 3 a.m. You call her. Call her right now.
Yeah.
And I immediately, the doula was like, you need to go to the hospital. And so we get in there like a movie. I'm screaming, and they rush me they're like, we need to test you for COVID. Let's go in here. And as they're getting me undressed and trying to get all the things, they're like, okay, well, the baby's coming. And I was like, I know, I want the drugs, but I don't want the drugs, but I want the drugs. And she's like, no, there's no time. Like, the baby's coming out of you right now.
You're kidding me.
Yeah.
So you didn't even have time for an epidural.
Oh no. And that's what I wanted. I wanted an unmedicated birth. That's what I was chasing this entire time. But of course, by the time, and whenever it's if everything is going the way it, physically should be going, usually when it's hitting, like, you can't handle it anymore, it usually means it's all about to happen. And I was at that point where I was like, no, I can't do this. And they were like laying me back on the table, and I was like, I hold it. I can't do it. And a nurse, like, she literally got in my face, like in between my legs, like got in my face. Cause also the nurses are yelling at me like, don't worry, we've caught a baby before. Cause my doctor wasn't even there. She was trying to get there from a different floor. Yes. So I've got like nurses yelling at me like, don't worry, we've caught a baby before. And I'm like, what? I want drugs. And so, but I was panicked. So she just like popped up in between my legs and like,
oh my God,
got
like a
in
movie.
my face. And yes. And she was like, get it together. She's like, you can do this. She's like, I need you to hold it. You cannot push. Stop pushing. If you push when you're not ready, then you're going to rip in half. So you hold it until I tell you to go. And I just was like, okay. And then so I waited a few seconds, and she was like, push. And then I pushed her out, and one push, she just like plopped out. And the funniest thing, I just was like, looked at Joe, and I was like, I did it. And he was like, you did it. And we were like high-fiving. And the nurse was like, hey, do you want a picture of your baby? And we were like, oh yeah.
Yes. Please, picture of the baby.
Oh yeah. We want the baby too. We just, I could not believe.
On your first birth though, did you have an epidural or no?
I did. And it was at the last minute. And I
did
feel
you
like
feel like any difference? Like, obviously there was a difference, right? You didn't feel a lot opposed to feeling everything the second time.
Now looking back, I think she was right about to be born. And I just like the doctors were like, hey, I got transferred from a birthing center because there was meconium in the water, which basically means that the baby's been stressed. And so they've released like, it's essentially like what comes out of the baby, like their first poop essentially. But if it gets in the water, they can inhale it and it's really dangerous. And so we had to be transferred. And that's when everything like really sped up. Now looking back, I think that like I could have absolutely had an unmedicated birth that first time if there wasn't so much chaos within the room. Because once I got the epidural, that's when the heart rate started dropping, which is very common with epidurals. You know, and so then that all got chaotic because there was already meconium in the way. Anyway, it just turned into like everyone, doulas and husband and doctors and nurses were all just like yelling at each other. And
a lot of conversations.
A lot of but I was on drugs at that point. So I was like, guys,
everything's going to be chill.
No,
because
chill.
That's what I wonder, because for me, you know, I had preached for an entire podcast season, I'd like to say, that I was not going to have an epidural and I was going to do a natural birth because my mom did a natural birth, and I had trained in hypnobirthing and had a coach and did the whole 9 yards. And push came to shove, when I got to the hospital, I had to get an epidural at 8.5 centimeters because it was not progressing far enough where the 10 was hitting right away, where it was like, she's going to pop out. And I had a back labor, which meant her head was stuck on my spinal cord. So every time I was having a contraction, it was so weird. I wasn't feeling it in my stomach. And I'm like, shouldn't you feel it in your stomach? Like, shouldn't you feel it in your stomach? And I was feeling it in my back, and I was getting paralyzed every contraction. So I couldn't sit, I couldn't stand, I couldn't lay down. Everything that I was doing was in such pain. And I had a contraction on my spinal cord when they were giving me the epidural, and I had to breathe through it and not move. And that was for me
the hardest thing.
The hardest thing. And it was also my like mind over matter, because I just remember looking at my husband and I was looking at Sturgis, and we were doing our breathing, and I was like in a hypnosis, and I didn't move the entire like time. And they're like, just a little longer. And I'm like, Jesus, this is the longest like 5 minutes of my life. You know, it was just absurd. But I was not, I didn't feel like a failure after the birth, but when I gave into the epidural while I was in labor, I just tears were coming down my eyes, because I was like, I'm a failure. I can't believe that I did this. So, and I know I've talked to a lot of women who have felt that way, where they feel like failures. And so that's why I always wondered, you know, what it would be like to have an unmedicated versus medicated. And here, someone like you has done both. Like, did you feel like, oh, I did a better job because I did not have the medication, or at some point it just doesn't really matter?
No, I mean,
just
look,
like what's
healthy
healthy for the baby,
healthy mama. I think mothers having an opportunity, or birthing people having an opportunity within the room to have a voice, is like an element that can get lost sometimes in a lot of like hospitals and medical care. And so I think like, if that, I feel like that's the most important thing. And also, like, we live in a modern age where like if things are not positioned perfectly and it is paralyzing you, or if there is danger to you or danger to your child, or you're just not someone who wants to have an unmedicated birth, that is totally fine. I think it, you know, I didn't, at a certain point, you have to just like the process is not going to be like perfect for everybody. And also, when I did have an unmedicated birth, it wasn't like, yeah, I birthed better. It was more, I was chasing that natural high in the experience of it. And I will admit, I got that. Like, the cool thing about what I enjoyed of an unmedicated birth is that it's just how the body works. And I'm kind of slightly obsessed with it. Like, you know, the rush of blood down to, you know, the pelvic floor and the pelvic area, you can't feel it because it's numbed out, because it's so the doctor's able to stitch you up. So it actually like didn't hurt at all. I didn't tear because I could feel all of my contractions. I could feel when she was starting to come out. You know, it's the connection that like being able to feel everything while very painful is also like what helps you through the process. But
right
on the other side of it, like I was up, you know, walking to the bathroom within 15 minutes. I was up and like eating crackers. I had the jolt of energy that, I mean, I felt like I could run a marathon. Like I was up all day. We brought music, candles, like fake candles, not real ones.
Yes,
but
yes,
we like, it was just the most relaxing, beautiful day. And I just like that the rush of endorphins were absolutely what I was like chasing and was so cool. But it didn't mean that I was like better at it.
But isn't it wild how our body works? Like how that literally,
I love it. It's so cool.
I am fascinated by it. And I'm just, and I've been having a very slow recovery process still postpartum because I have to do pelvic floor therapy once a week. Like there were a lot of issues and I tore and I was hemorrhaging and I was in and out of the hospital. There was a lot of stuff that happened.
That's so scary.
And it's so scary and it's still so scary, but it's just fascinating to me because I had no idea that our bodies were capable of so many things and being able to heal ourselves. And I've never been more in touch with my body. And I'm sure you feel the same way where you just like every little thing, like even now, just something as silly as like getting a cold or something like that. I'm like, oh, I know what my body needs, like instinctually, which I never thought I did before. You know, I never knew, but I truly feel like very in touch. I know every orifice of my body. I can see it now.
Yeah. Well, and that also lends itself to parenting in a way. I mean,
yes.
it's, you know, and regardless, I think of whether you give birth to a child or not, I think, which is what is really incredible is when you have that really close connection with this little being that you're taking care of all the time and you start to, it's when you can start to trust your intuition and not like question it. You know, it's the same thing as, you know, knowing like, oh, this is just a fever from teething. And I know some people say that babies don't get fevers from teething, but like and the two that I've had, it really lines up. And
yeah,
you know what I mean? They did. Don't know what to tell you. But like, and trusting that intuition, like, oh, that's not a cold. I think that's just a teething. And actually their stomach hurts. And I think it's because and all those things of not convincing yourself that you're overthinking it. I think when you can actually trust yourself within parenting and realize like nobody knows what they're doing. I mean, I think the most difficult thing right now is parenting within an age of social media. It's like there's so many positives to it because if you do have questions on how to, you know, on products that are available for your babies, or if you're recognizing that your kids are having certain types of tantrums and you don't know how to talk with them, you know, there's so many great websites and social media accounts that you can follow for just really great parenting advice.
Yeah.
And there's a place that you can go for comfort, but also on the flip side of that, it can just feel like this constant comparison of like, well, that's what they're doing. And why doesn't my life look like that? How can they sit and cook breakfast and look perfect in this photo? And I can't even like, you know, remember to put deodorant on, you know, like, and I smell myself like how, and so that's the difficult thing.
Well, there's a lot of fear
right
too, like a lot of like preying on the fear of new parents. And I think it's interesting. I just had a parent in me class that I did and this morning, and I talked about this with the teacher where we were talking about, you know, how all of us moms are very different. We're all mothering very different. And in our class, it happens to be 3 moms. And I said, yeah, I feel like the stress and anxiety, like for instance, when I was postpartum, I had to wear a diaper myself, like my baby, for, I think I was in it for 6 weeks, which a lot of moms were in it for like a week that they'd have bleeding here and there. Well, like I said earlier, I had, you know, not only torn, but I had hemorrhaged and I continued to hemorrhage for 3.5 weeks. And they were talking about blood transfusions. I was out of the hospital. I take medicine. And then I had to have a DNC and, afterwards, which it was crazy. It was like 3.5 weeks.
Was there still placenta in there or like what was,
they had checked the placenta after I had delivered the placenta and it was perfectly intact. So they think that there must have been some sort of, you know, like even the size of a little fingernail of a skin tear could have been in there that continually was causing clots.
Wow.
You know, something like that. And I mean, it's like TMI, but there were like clot size that were the size of a liver coming out of me. So it was a constant trauma every single hour where I was like, oh my God, what's this? Oh my God, what's this? Right. You know, you're just like, every time you look down, you're seeing the worst, and and I still expect the worst every single day, even though I haven't had any bleeding since. And I haven't even gotten my period. So I'm like waiting till that moment happens, you know, that trauma of like seeing the blood for the first time. But it was interesting. Like I would see moms who had given birth around the same time that I did, and they were like walking around and they were able to hold their baby. And I remember just crying and crying and crying because I would feel like, why can't I hold my baby? Because after 10 minutes, I would be so lightheaded because I had so much blood loss that I would have to hand lady over to my husband or to my mom or, you know, to someone, whoever was at the house, because I was afraid that I was going to faint. And I just remember finding TikToks, like when she would be breastfeeding or sleeping, and I would just find myself on TikTok, which I had never found myself ever scrolling. But I somehow, like some algorithm, some like robot found me and was like, you're a new mom going through trauma. Here you go. And it was the best like blessing in disguise, because I found other moms who were talking about blood clots, that were talking about hemorrhaging, that were talking about tears, that were talking about not being able to hold their babies. Because for the first month postpartum, now looking back at it, I can't tell you things that happened, but I grabbed a microphone and I started recording conversations, just myself, like of myself talking, so I could remember these things. And I just, so there was the flip side of the positivity of knowing there were other moms out there that were going through what I was going through. But then there was the other side of seeing moms that I knew that were able to hold their babies and able to do things and able to cook. And I was just like, what the fuck, you know, like how, you know, and it was like, you should be doing this. And there were a lot of, you know, like the websites and the books. Oh, at this time. But it was the same sort of thing that I had to realize, hey, you know, I was also being told, to, you know, in the second trimester, like it'd be, you know, rainbows and fucking butterflies. And for me, I was on the verge of having a mental breakdown, having to go into a hospital, you know, so you can't follow along. But that's why I wanted to do, you know, this podcast of like talking about the real shit that goes on in parenthood, because I don't know if it's talked about it enough where it's okay to have these like feelings that are maybe scary to admit out loud. You know, you're not alone in it. And that's what I found in the TikTok, like finding this like community, and on Reddit where you feel heard. And it's crazy. It's crazy, you know, that it's out there, you know, so it's the plus and the minus to the whole social media.
And I really feel though that that's just if that's a lesson in long-term parenting, is that it's the same thing as, you know, even the idea of like super mom or super parent, like it doesn't exist. Like no one can be Clark Kent and Superman. Like Clark Kent will always be needed at work while like Superman's always needed in the sky, and you can't be in both places at the same time. Right. And so it's really just taking it day by day. Like there are some days, like today, I feel like I'm actually a pretty great fucking mom. You know what I mean? Like I know my kids are good. I know that they're safe. I know that they're loved. I know that I was able to make a music class right before this. I know that I'm able to make a Girl Scout meeting right after this.
Amazing.
And then there are other days where I'm like, I'm totally forgot everything, forgot to like send the snack to school, forgot that, you know, I forgot to get groceries, and now we're just eating pizza, you know, from the freezer for the third day. And like you're going to have good times, you're going to have bad days. And if you can really just quiet, and it really is turning into like, are my kids okay? Am I okay? Right. Are my kids okay? Is the roof over the head? Like, is there food on the table, or can I provide those things? And like, that's going to be enough sometimes. But like you know, it's so wonderful that you were able to find, other people who were experiencing what you were experiencing, and also recognize like there is a community for that. And there's also a community for people who are actually like doing great because something
thriving.
will come up.
Yeah.
We're thriving. And it ebbs and flows. It waves, you know?
Totally.
It's like and then you're going to turn around and you're going to be like, actually, I am thriving right now. Today is a great day. This week is a great week. And when you recognize someone else going through a hard time, that's when you can say like, I'm here to listen. What can I do?
And
to
I
help,
remember that it was bad. And I think that it's so true because I have been so, blessed with my daughter being she's been an amazing sleeper since day one. She had colic for a little bit, but like we knew what it was. You could recognize, and it was like, okay, we know what this is. Like there's a solution to this problem, but I've been really, really, truly blessed of like being a great sleeper, being a happy baby, like napping on the go. Like she can nap with drums playing in the background, and she can nap, like out at the Grove, like having a great time at the mall. You know what I mean? Like she's really easy. And it's like, yeah, I went through a lot of shit, but there are people that are now going through stuff that, may not be talking about it or maybe having a harder time. And they are like slowly saying things. And now it's my turn to be there for them as people were there for me at that time, and you're right. It's like it ebbs and flows and it comes at different times. I wanted to ask, like, what has it been like for you now being, you obviously are co-parenting and have a wonderful relationship with your co-parent partner.
My co-parent
partner. But when you are alone on the daily, with two girls, what do you do for your own, mental health and your emotional, support? Where do you find that? How can you, like, is there anything that you've learned through this time that you can share with other parents who are maybe doing this on their own, and are just starting out on doing it on their own, like how they can get through it? Like what's been the best thing for you?
Oh man, I think, look, I will say, like, I am very lucky. Like, I am co-parenting with a great co-parent. I think that automatically helps. I'm also in a position that we are able to afford childcare. So we are able to continue to work. And I do have like an element of support when I need that. So that's fantastic. But I think it's harder, it's always hard. I would assume for a lot of people, it's hardest at the beginning just because it's all brand new. It's, you get into such a routine when you're living under the same house, co-parenting with someone. And when you're no longer under the same roof, it's just a very different routine on top of just that, regardless of anyone's circumstances, like it's still sad, and so you're kind of processing it all and trying to figure out this new routine. A couple things
it must be like a death, right? I mean, like in a sense,
yes, yes, 100%, 100%. There's, I think with you, it's grace. That's been like my mantra word, is giving myself the gift of grace. And I just remember even, I'm in a rental house, and which I love. It's this really magical house, and it's really special. And
it's yours,
and it's mine. And I needed a dining room table, and or like a kitchen table, and it didn't come in yet because everything's been delayed for the last couple of years. Yeah, and I had that moment of just like, could have felt really sad and like it's bad and it's not good enough, and it's not like perfect, and instead it's like, no, we're picnicking on the floor, that's okay. It's totally okay. We're having adventures. It all looks a little different, but it's okay.
You work with what you got.
You work with what you've got, and the table came in very soon after. We were fine. Right. Everyone was fine. And then accepting help when if you're not very good at that, like really accepting that help. I had a friend fly in and help me move in. I also, there are certain things that I knew I couldn't keep up with. And so I had people come help, like there's like a TaskRabbit, is a great option. If you're just like, I don't know how to, I can't change all these light bulbs and hang all these things and get this curtain rod up and get the TV up. Like, you ask for help. I had friends come over, I've had friends come, and like even on at Halloween recently, I had friends, and so I'm able to like help pass out candy, and then there are trick-or-treaters, and then we go trick-or-treating. And so it's when people show up for you, just accept it. And then also when people aren't able to show up for you, that's okay too, because they have things going on too. And so it's just recognizing, like, it's giving yourself grace, it's giving the whole situation grace, and knowing that like it's a tunnel and it's going to feel really dark. And then there are going to be little glimpses of light, and it's going to feel scary. And then you're going to find the light at the end of the tunnel, and then you're going to be in the light, and you're going to be like, this is amazing. And then because it's life, there's going to be more tunnels. Like, this isn't the only tunnel.
No.
But it's just if you can put one foot forward at a time and not just like sit there too long in it, that's been really helpful. Yeah. But I've been so lucky, with just really lovely support and just like in emotional supportive friends that I just gotten to know here. Cause I also had moved to a new city.
Well, that's what I was going to say. I think that what you're dealing with is even more anxiety ridden for me. Like, cause I just think of, I'm really good at meeting friends and getting new friends, but I feel like a new city would be very scary for me. Like that would be very hard. Has it been easier because you've kind of get to start anew all over in a new city with new people, new family, or has it been jarring? Like, I don't, what's that like?
A little bit of both. I mean, I think regardless of any life circumstance that you're in, I find that a lot of people I speak to find that moving to a new city is really stressful, and it just doesn't really stress me out. I don't know. I'm someone who travels by themselves. I'm someone who goes to events by myself. I'm someone who is totally fine doing things on my own. So because I'm like,
you're an independent woman, girl. You're an independent woman.
Like, my favorite place in the whole world is like an airport bar, because I'm like, oh, I get to meet new people and like bug people sitting next to me and talk
travelers.
I love an airport bar. That's
amazing.
An airport bar. I will sit there for like 3 hours, just by the end of it, just like crying with like Cheryl next to me, being like, oh my gosh. And I'm like rooting for you and your sister, and you guys are going to figure it out, Cheryl.
That needs to be a good Hallmark movie, like the airport bar. Like,
I mean, it'd be a great, Netflix series. But so moving to a new city doesn't scare me. I moved a lot when I was younger. I've moved a lot in adulthood. And so that doesn't scare me. And I really like that, for all of our kids, they've had the experience of moving, and I don't know anything else. I mean, when I was born in Houston. My parents lived in Atlanta. I lived in Memphis. Like, we were in Orlando. We moved to multiple houses in Orlando. And since then I've been in LA multiple times. I was in Atlanta for a long time, in Denver, and now Nashville. Like, I'm moving to a new city. I'm actually think that everyone should have that experience at some point.
Yes. And I moved a lot as a kid too. So I feel like, but that's what I think is so funny and different from us is like, now I'm like, my husband and I talk about it all the time. Like, I don't know, maybe we should just get out of LA and maybe we should go somewhere, especially during the pandemic. I think that was the conversation a lot. We realized he's not an actor. As an actor, I didn't need to be in Los Angeles anymore. There is no audition. Like, there is no, which is what I'm great at, is the in-person interviews. Like, I don't really thrive on a tape, I'm going to be honest, so it's very hard for me. But at that point, we could be anywhere we wanted to be. And as an older, more like aware of my environment person, and especially now, I think being a mom, I'm like, well, what would I do? Like, how would I meet other moms? Like, how would I have a life? But I was never scared like that when I was younger. When I was younger, I was like, oh my God, I'm going to Vancouver. Great. Awesome. Going there on my own, going to figure out a whole brand new city, going to go to Atlanta, going to go here. So that's why I just give you major praise, because it's something that I'm so fearful of now, being a mom, like change. And I'm usually so good with change. So I think that it's awesome. And it's just going to make your life for your girls so much better. It's good to be in different environments and just learn and see different seasons too, I think is so important.
And see different seasons. But also, like, I mean, so much change comes with parenting. I mean, I'm sure you've even noticed in 5 months, you're like, oh, well, it'll be crazy when they can hold their head up. And they're like, wait, it'll be crazy when they're doing tummy time. It'll be crazy when they're eating solids. It'll be crazy when they're crawling.
And everything's happening.
That, like, everything happens 1 month after 1 month after month. It's this constant change. And as they get older too, it just never ends. Like, you kind of are always, you know, going with the flow. It's funny. I was at like, there's like an indoor play area that I take my youngest to. She's almost 2. And like, there's a mom there, and her like little boy around the same age came up and just like pushed her down. And she was like, oh my gosh, I'm so sorry. He's in a pushing phase. I was like, it's fine. Like, and she's like, I'm just worried he'll never be out of it. And he was like, I was like, he will. Like, he will. Yeah. This is so short-lived. Yeah. Don't worry. Don't worry. Even him, like, pooping his pants, that's just a phase. He will be out of diapers one day. Like, then you'll have another thing to worry about. Yes, you know, it's just like, there's always like something else around.
But will it be over? I don't know. I know a lot of adult men that still shit their pants, so I'm not quite sure about that, Candice. I'm not sure about that. No, but I absolutely love this for you. And I want to, you know, get into a Superbloom podcast because this is your new baby. I was so lucky enough to come on as a guest and be a part of this new beginning for you. What does a Superbloom mean? How did you get this name?
Well, a Superbloom is, it is a botanical phenomenon that occurs in dry desert landscapes. Ooh. And in order for a superbloom to happen, there has to be a super unusually wet rainy season. Ooh. So it has to like be this insane amount of rain that like put in. What happens is
downpour of
downpour. It has to feel so fucking heavy. And because that's what gets like farther and farther and farther into the soil and into what they call the soil matrix, actually. Ooh. And it in order for the seeds to be nurtured, you have to have that heavy downpour of rain. And that's what allows them to get enough water to have the ability to grow all that journey all the way up and break through and super bloom all at the same time. And it usually happens like more often than not, like every decade. It's, you know, it doesn't happen every single year. And what was interesting is, I don't know if you remember, in 2020, the California poppies super bloomed that year.
That's right. Oh, I didn't realize that was a super bloom. Yes.
That's a super bloom. Yes.
And then all of the influencers ruined it because they all showed up and took fucking pictures. And then all the super bloom died.
Super bloom. Yes. You're supposed to just admire it from afar. You know, I did actually take my daughter.
It was all over the news. Yeah.
I actually took Florence out at that time because we were just inside going nuts.
You were one of the crazy people.
I was one of the assholes, yeah. But we did not walk onto the flowers. Like we weren't doing a photo shoot.
Because we
did
all
not
mad.
do that. I know.
We were all mad.
We drove there. They have little like walking paths that they hoped people would stay on. So we saw it.
That's so
and
cute.
It was
You have
so
a picture,
beautiful.
That's so nice.
It was really, really beautiful. And so, but that's what it is. And so my hope was to have conversations with people who have been through really tough times. And often when you're sitting in those moments, it feels like, wow, how am I ever going to get out of this? Like, how is this serving me? You know, why is this happening? You know, how am I going to find the strength to come out the other side of it?
Sure.
And usually those are the moments that you look back on in life and go like, wow, I was fucking strong. It's the same thing as even going back to when you had to hold still for that epidural while you're being paralyzed by a fucking contraction.
Yes.
Where you're like, how am I going to do this? And then you look back in the whole experience of your birth, which also had, I'm sure, a lot of other moments, but it was that the hardest moment of it. You're like, that was my like, fuck yeah, I'm going to do it. Look at me. I can do this.
Right.
And that I think is what is so like beautiful to be reminded of people who are on the other side of really tough times in their life, who are able to reflect and go like, wow, I don't know if I actually could have accomplished the things I hoped to do. I didn't even know what I wanted out of life until I had been through these moments.
Right.
And so that's kind of the hope of my sit downs with guests who are joining me. I mean, you so beautifully were willing to share in your experience of deciding to, your journey through becoming a mother of like, okay, I'm going to get off medication. I'm going to assemble a team around me. I'm going to really look at like my bipolar disorder and say like, okay, you and I are going to work together somehow through this process. And yes, and go really within yourself. And do you feel now also 5 months in, do you feel like you're like, how do you feel knowing that like that was a really scary path to take looking back?
It's interesting because I still am on that scary path because I have not yet gone back on my medication because I'm breastfeeding, like exclusively breastfeeding. And I, there are a lot of women that have, that will go back on their medication, and will formula feed. For me, it was kind of one of those things where the decision was, if I am able to breastfeed, which I was not sure I was able to because my mom could only produce breast milk for 6 weeks. She couldn't produce anything after that. So it was one of those things where if I'm able to, I'm going to continue breastfeeding. And then I'm going to decide, hey, I'm going to evaluate. Should I get on my medication? Should I not? So far, knock on wood, I have been doing fine. I have not had a manic episode. I have not had any meltdowns or any sort of outrages or outbursts, if you will. So I am going to keep on breastfeeding. Once I start introducing solid foods to her, once I start, feeding her other things, then I'm going to see how my hormones regulate, how everything goes back. Because there's also, I was lucky. I did not find I had any postpartum anxiety or mood disorders that had come along, afterwards. But that being said, they also say once you stop breastfeeding, your hormones regulate again and that you could get postpartum depression after that. So it's something that I'm still aware of. It's something that I'm still cautious and like tiptoeing around. Like I feel like I'm tiptoeing like a cartoon, I'm like going around the TNT bombs and I'm like, wait, can I just make it to the end of the railroad right now? So once I hit that, I'm going to see like what happens and evaluate. And I've talked to, many doctors and they say, you may not have to go up to the dosage that you were before, you may have to go. It evens out,
Yeah.
Sometimes, there's, my friend, who's comes on and does a bunch of special episodes with me on the podcast called Beauty in the Brain. He's a neuroscientist. And, he says, we have created neural pathways in our mind. And because you got on medication at a certain time and you're getting off, may have created pathways where you don't need to get back onto your medication at the dosage that you were at, you've been able to control. Now, who knows? We're going to see what happens. And I will, let everyone on, who's listening know the journey that I'm going on because I want to be honest. But I have a lot of friends who live with bipolar disorder. And as soon as they gave birth, they went back onto their medication and just didn't breastfeed at that point. They just did formula. For me, it wasn't a choice. I wanted to see if I could breastfeed first. And that's kind of, it's a day by day process. And like I said, like I'm very lucky. I have my mom around me. I have my husband around me. I have doctors around me. I have friends. It's recognizing that I have that support system that if things were going off the deep end, they would be like, hey, check it around now. You're a mom. You have a responsibility. You need to put your, oxygen mask on first before you take care of ladies. You know what I mean? And so I have those people that have been able to check in with me and regulate and kind of just like shake me up if I need to a little bit,
Yeah.
But it is tough and it's a lot. It is a lot, it's a day by day process as it is for everyone, for everything, whether it be parenthood, whether it be, being, in relationships, being not in relationships anymore, whatever it is, everything is a daily process. And I think that that's something that we're not alone in.
Yeah, I will say, like, I'm just now feeling a little bit more normal on the parenting front with, I forgot that, like, once they, at least in my experience with the two that I've given birth to, that, that by the time, like, even my youngest is almost 2, I'm sleeping better. I am more myself. Like, you know what I mean? Like, and she's more independent. You know what I mean? She can actually sit there and like, and be engaged with a bunch of toys for longer than just a few minutes. Like she walks,
It's not,
you know what I mean?
seconds.
She's not, I don't have to like,
I'm going to throw it,
freak out and like hover over her all the time. You know what I mean? And so, I feel like once you get closer to that too, you just start to recognize yourself. I forgot how just, it really is. It's beyond just the 4th trimester. It's beyond just that first year. It really is those first 2 years where it's just, everything's just happening so quickly. And then you have to be on guard and on point all the time. So, I feel like it'll be interesting to like, you know, a year and a half from now, for you to look
to
back
see what happened.
Just like,
how have you been able to, you know, you have been working and doing movies and TV and stuff like that. How was that for you being a mom and being able to also be a career woman with acting? Because I have not worked yet since giving birth. And, you know, I've been slowly going back and be like, okay, well, I'm going to start auditioning again and doing that kind of stuff. But it's something that I'm very fearful of, oh my God, like that time away from the baby, that time away, you know, were you able to manage that? And when did you feel, okay, you know what, I'm ready to get back. Like, I know that I can. Or did you ever not feel that 100% confident?
I always feel that way. Like I want to get back, because I do like, that is such a part of my identity is working, my personal self identity. And so I panic sometimes and I just like rush into it. But what I've learned even in moments where I have been back working and as a working mother is like, you just realize no matter what, I'm going to be at work and I'm going to feel bad. I'm going to feel bad like I'm missing something. I'm going to feel bad that I should be home with my kids. And then when I'm home with my kids, I'm going to feel like I really wish I was on set right now working because I really like working.
I do too.
And so
I love it.
I know. So I've at this point, if I'm working and I'm enjoying it, or even if I just know I'm not enjoying it, but it's what I can do to put as a job, because it's also like providing, you know what I mean? Like, you know, just because we work in the arts doesn't mean we're always just like so artistic. Like it's also like, this is a job, you know,
it's also like bread and butter.
And so, you know, that part helps, but also I've had to really just, it goes back to that word and that mantra of just grace. Like, you know, it's okay. My kids are going to be okay. If I know that they're taken care of, if I know that they're loved, if I know that they're safe, like it is 100% okay for me to be at a workplace and focus on work. Usually the times it goes wrong is when I try to bring it all together. And like, I try to be like, oh, well, let me have the nanny bring my kids to set. And then and that's where it goes wrong.
It's like, no, like, separate it. Keep it.
I go to work,
family.
I focus, I come home. And the other thing is like, when I'm working, I can't come home and be everything else. Like I can't all of a sudden try to like arrange like dinner plans or like stay, you know, it's like it's okay. That's when you got to like, I mean, and these are also, we don't work traditional 9-to-5 jobs that give us a routine. So, so of course, when you have more of a traditional job, you can get into a routine where you carve out space for maybe your family and for work. But when you're working as an actor or any kind of element of like a film crew or, you know, something that isn't a traditional 9-to-5, it's going to be more difficult. But look, my oldest knew sign language. She was a baby that was taught sign language by my nanny at the time. And I didn't know until there was a babysitter that told me, wow, your daughter's really good at signing. And I was like, she just moves her hands a lot. And she was like, no, it's sign language. Let me show you. And she had taken a video of it. And I asked my nanny at the time, and this was for Florence when she was a baby. And I said, did you teach her sign language by chance? She was like, oh yeah, she's really good at it.
Oh my God.
I was working so much. I mean, I had night nurses at night because I had to sleep on my turnarounds. I mean, there would be like 3 days in a row where I wouldn't see my own baby because she was asleep when I was leaving and asleep when I got home. And she knew sign language and I didn't even know. But you know what? I'm a great mom. Like her and I have a great relationship. There is no like punishment. You know what I mean? It's okay.
No.
And it's okay to tell yourself when you're a really good mom, to tell yourself you're a good mom. And none of this like hashtag mom boss, blah, blah, blah. No. But just to like, you don't have to scream it to the world, but just have like a moment of like, it's okay. I cannot know that my baby doesn't know. I don't know that my baby knows sign language. But you know what? I'm doing the best I can. I'm going to give myself some grace. She also knows
Japanese, but you're not speaking to her in Japanese.
Exactly.
So she's not, you didn't know that, but I knew that because I speak Japanese.
Exactly. Yeah.
No, but it's like, true. It's about giving yourself a positive affirmation and I used to like hate affirmations, but I feel like when I learned hypnobirthing and I still listen to these affirmations on the daily, which is crazy because it's all about the birth, but it just seems to relax me and it relaxes the baby. So we listen to them. But I think that there is something really strong if you have those positive thoughts, even if you're having a really, really bad day, like just be like, forgive yourself. And you're right. Give yourself grace. Like I'm going to be okay. And I'm going to do this. And I feel like it's important because on top of, just being a parent, also being a parent alone at home sometimes, like you need to hear that. And sometimes I feel like we live totally separate lives, my husband and I, because he's traveling so much and I have to do it on my own sometimes. And it's like, it's overwhelming and vice versa. Sometimes he has to do it and it's exhausting,
It is.
And you forget to give yourself like that grace.
Yes.
Now, for you, do you feel like you're at this point in your life where you're like, do I start dating again? Are you ready for that? Or are you like, no? Like, how would you, I don't know how you would even find the time. Like, I just want to like, kind of like find a husband and be like, here, just like, there you go, Candice. Like, let's just like put him in this spot right here. Like, he's a good dad. Everything's already set up for you because it's exhausting.
I'm really honestly like the most important person I'm like working on a relationship with is myself. Like,
amen. I love that.
I'm in such a good place, like getting to know myself and also really, just it's a lot of new and it's a lot of change. And so, serving like, really leaning into the parts of parenting that I enjoy and even the parts that are really tough, but like enjoying it anyway, because they're so fleeting, working on my relationships with other people, working on my relationships with like, like this new podcast and like in business venture, like really asking myself what a lot of people I think have done post 2020 is like, what brings me joy? And also what is my intention on doing something? Am I doing something because it's the shoulda, coulda, woulda? Am I doing something because I feel like I'm just trying to make a quick buck and, or like, what brings joy to my life?
What is it?
How do I want my life to look? Yeah. And I think sometimes, as far as going back to oxygen masks, something that we can ignore sometimes is our relationship with ourselves and our own inner voice as,
absolutely,
as a woman. And so that's really like what I'm enjoying working on right now, even if it can be uncomfortable in times. And I feel like there's something really special about being in your 30s. And I've noticed this with a lot of conversation with women who are in their like mid 30s, especially, who all of a sudden are looking like reflecting for the first time and like processing a lot of things that they didn't understand either was presented to them or happening to them in their 20s and even giving their younger versions of themselves like a lot of grace and
forgiveness
and healing and forgiveness. And so I feel like that's kind of been where I'm at lately. But I also like, another way that grace is really great, especially as your kids get older. And when you do find yourself overwhelmed as a parent, my ultimate like favorite mantra that I say to my 6-year-old is, baby, mama needs some space and grace. Space and grace. I just need a little space and grace.
Obsessed. Mama needs some space
mama
and
needs
grace.
Some space and grace. It doesn't mean like I'm shutting you out. It just means mommy needs to sit here and just like have you sit right there, just on the other side of the couch. I just need a little bit of space. I need a little bit of grace because I need to take some deep breaths because I'm overwhelmed and overcaffeinated.
Yes. No.
And then now she catches on and she'll just be like, Mom, just take a breath. It's okay. I'm just going to sit here. And then she's like, are you good now? And I'm like, I'm good. All right. What do you need? What can I do? Gosh. What can I find?
I cannot wait till Lady starts talking and can say these like funny little one-liners.
Oh, it's so fun.
Like it must be just the best. And then to hear like a baby go, it's okay, Mama. You just need your space and grace.
Oh my God. I know. It's the best. It is the cutest fucking thing. It is the best. And also going back to what I've realized is in tough moments is I've had a lot of like reflection, going back to like reflecting on, you know, a career path that I have found myself on. And also like how our industry of like film and television and entertainment has changed so much during the pandemic.
So much.
And just structurally and opportunity. And so I've like really been thinking like, okay, well, this is what did I dream of when I was younger? What did I dream of? And I always wanted to be a mom. I always wanted to be a mom. And so in those moments where like, one's throwing bananas on the floor and the other one is like braid my hair and there's like Elmo going and then like the tea kettle's going and like I've really found myself, whereas I might have felt a little bit more overwhelmed before, I go like, oh, this is like the fun, messy stuff that actually is like the good, yummy stuff. This is the momming that I always dreamed of having. And like, I'm in it right now. And
everything that you just described is like what I imagine like a funny scene in like a rom-com in the 90s would be, but like a family rom-com, you know what I mean? Like the messiness and like, or like a holiday movie, like like not the depressing part of the Family Stone, but the really fun part of the Family Stone. Yes. Like that's what I feel like is exactly what you're describing. And I get it. Like that's, for me, I wasn't like, oh my God, I want to be a mom, but I knew I wanted a family and I didn't know what that meant. But it's that same feeling where even the like silly things when Lady like poops all over me, like I laugh about it because it's like that comedy moment where you're like, oh wait, this is like what I always envisioned what my life would be. And it's like so sweet. And I say that as I see my mom, like walking, my mom's walking Lady outside right now, like on her stroller. And I'm like, I always wanted that, but I didn't know if that meant I wanted to be an in quote unquote mom. Like that was what I wanted, but I knew I wanted some sort of family. And I look at it, I'm like, wow, this is everything that I could have ever wanted and more. Like take this moment to be like, we may not have A, B, and C going on, but this is such an important blessing that a lot of people don't get to experience and want to experience. And so you take that moment of space and grace. I love that.
Space and grace.
Oh my gosh. Well, Candice, I'm going to ask you my final question. What is your emotional support?
My emotional support has been a squad of women from Salt Lake City, Beverly Hills, Potomac, all on the Bravo network that is just keeping me going. And New York. Well, I mean, I haven't met the new ones in New York yet. But that's my emotional support is, honestly, those fucking Bravo ladies, Bravo ladies, because you're keeping me going.
Bravo.
Fucking Bravo.
Oh my gosh. I completely am going to steal this one because that is such a support system of mine. Literally when she goes to sleep, she takes like a pre-nap before bedtime and my husband will be like, oh, let's watch something. I'm like, no, I want to watch Andy Cohen. I want to relax. I want to watch the housewives screaming at each other. This is what I need in my life right now. Please get out of here. Leave.
Yes, these are my lullabies. This is my space and grace. This is my
that
space
is your
and grace.
Space and grace. I am so thankful that you came on the podcast again. I cannot thank you enough. Like everyone loves you. I love you. Like you are you are such an inspiration for so many reasons. Like I need to just have like a bite of you all the time just for this energy and this like goodness. How can everyone find you? Even though I'm going to have everything listed, and how can everyone follow a Superbloom podcast?
I think I'm at a Superbloom pod on Instagram. Okay. My personal is at Candice King on Instagram. I'm on TikTok I think I'm Candice King or it's Candice King. I don't know
I'll
because
find
Candice King was taken.
Because your TikToks are great, so everyone needs to see them.
Thank you. I'm trying really hard. But yeah, that's it. You can, if you go to @Candice King, everything's in my link tree on there. And I just adore you, and truly, I'm so glad that we got to do this again. So anytime.
Oh, I'm going to